Hey everyone, welcome to the Office Hours Tuesday Focus. This one is date coded 260519. Tonight I'm welcoming show friend Adam Tao back to Office Hours. Many of you know Adam as the developer of a whole raft of incredibly useful apps, including MixEffect for controlling ATEM Switchers. Well, here on the show, we probably know him best as one of the lead software engineers at Zoom up until a couple of years ago. But he's here tonight to tell us about his newest app, Action Phrase. It's a tool for triggering cameras, graphics, layouts, and more using natural voice commands that you define. It's all leveraging on-device speech recognition to match phrases you create in the app that can then communicate with production software, hardware, and services. As always, your questions run things around here, and Cindy Drozda is going to be our question reader for tonight, ready for your questions for Adam. So if you have questions directly for him, make sure you get into the Office Hours QR system. I'm going to toss it up on the screen. You can simply take a picture of that QR code or type askofficehours.global into any web browser. That will, in real time, get you in and allow you to ask questions that Adam can deal in the last segment of our show. So that's how all that works. Oh, also, if you don't want to use the QR code, you just type in askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Any web browser, and that'll get you into the system. So I'm bringing Adam into the discussion up front here because we've got a lot to cover. And we got to see a little of Adam's presentation. And at first, I got to tell you, I was a tiny bit confused because I was seeing stuff happen on the screen as if there was someone in the back end switching signals. Now, we have people in the back who can do that, but I suddenly realized, wait a second, that's not what's happening here. When Adam is saying phrases, stuff's happening, and I wasn't fully cognizant of how this was working. Now I'm a little more so. So, Adam, I'm very excited to talk to you today. How are things going?
Things are going very well. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. Clearly, the world wants and needs apps that are specific problem solvers that help make us all more efficient. This is slotting for me into that space brilliantly. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired Action Phrase for you?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I've been making apps that control Blackmagic design ATEM switchers. And I've always been interested in kind of adding another control surface to controlling those devices. So I have a Stream Deck, I have MixEffect, I have the hardware buttons on the ATEM. Why not be able to use my voice to control that device as well? And so that was kind of like the idea behind Action Phrase. I had it like 2 years ago, but I just haven't had the time to build it until this year.
How many commands? I mean, is there an unlimited number of commands? How do you go about the process of making it understand you as a user?
Well, thankfully, I don't have to write a speech engine myself. So Apple has they released as part of like iOS 26, iPadOS 26, and macOS 26, this speech transcriber and speech analyzer framework. So it does a very good job of recognizing speech. There's also a bunch of open source models that you can install, not necessarily in my app, but in other apps that do a great job of speech recognition. So the kind of the field of speech recognition and transcription has gotten really good over the years. And so this is just an application of that. What if you can layer on control of live production, hardware, software, and services into this?
It's great hearing about it, but we would love to see it. Do you have anything you can demo for us today?
Sure. Let's go to the iPhone and let's do a demo. So pretend you're a technical director and you're running a show. You could also be the on talent on air and be doing like a live stream. But for this particular thing, I'm going to be like a technical director, kind of like the people behind the scenes at Office Hours, and I'm going to be doing a show with four guests. Focus on Jennifer. Go to the 4-up layout. Focus on Michael. Focus on Sanjay. Horizontal layout. Actually, let's go back to the 4-up layout. One moment. Go to the 4-up layout. Horizontal layout. Focus on Tasha. And back to me.
That's pretty amazing. And you were able to do all of that without literally touching anything. So if you had a demo and you had a product in your hand or something like that, everything we just saw happen would have happened exactly like that without you having to touch anything.
Exactly. So no buttons, no touching touch screens, no clicking the mouse or my trackpad. Just using.
I mean, I know in general, thousands upon thousands of people would love a capability like this, but I'm also thinking of folks who have mobility issues or literally can't, or, you know, are working with something dangerous or something like that. It's just the number of places where this is going to be hugely valuable to people just seems almost unlimited to me.
Yeah. Action Phase is kind of geared towards live production. So basically any live production software that you can think of, vMix, OBS, ATEM Switchers, Videohubs, Memo Live, there's HDR graphics. There's a whole suite of tools that Action Phase can control. I can't control like other things like your 3D printer yet, but you know, give me the API and maybe I'll add that in.
Nice. You were talking about taking this on the road and showing it in a couple of places. Do you have any stories about what people have thought about this software when they've seen it?
Right. So I was in Chicago at the beginning of April, where I was giving a presentation on indie developers and my long 30-year history with as an indie Apple developer. And so I did my presentation, and we can take a look at Keynote. And let's bring up my picture in picture. So you'll see Action Phrase running right here, and I can go to the scripts feature, and what I was able to do is I basically broke out my script. As you can see, here's my script, and I broke it out into different sections. And when I reached a certain section in the script, it would advance the slides automatically. So I'll just do a very quick demo of this running right now. So I have the script right here in my hand. So it would have been great if I memorized the speech, but I didn't. So I had my little cheat sheet here. So as everyone in the audience surely knows, Apple celebrated its 50th anniversary earlier this month, and I've been using Apple products for almost that same amount of time. Here's a photograph of me with an Apple II computer in the early 80s, and I would go blah, 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 and some of you seem like you followed the path similar to mine, growing up with Apple when it was the scrappy upstart and not the behemoth it is today. Quick poll. Raise your hand if you grew up like me in the Apple II era. Raise your hand if it was the Macintosh. Raise your hand if the iMac or iPod were your entry points into the Apple ecosystem. Finally, raise your hand if your first Apple experience was the iPhone or iPad. I don't know what became of that Apple II computer, but whatever it ignited in me over 45 years ago still burns bright today. I still love Apple products and I still build for them. So, back to me. You can see how that, actually, let me go back to me real quick. Let's turn that off. When you're in script mode, you have it turned, not necessarily recognize all your other little custom phrases.
Makes sense.
Turn that back on, and we can go back to here, and I can say, back to me.
And we're back to you.
Back to me. Go back to me. So I gave this presentation at the Deep Dish Swift conference, and I was basically walking around the stage with no clicker. I did have my little cheat sheet, and whenever I would say one of the magic phrases on the script, it would advance the slide. So I had the phrases highlighted in pink, and that was the phrase that I would need to say in order to go to the next slide.
I would imagine that there was a little bit of a rumble. Did a lot of people come up and were they interested in the back end and how you coded this and kind of how it came to be?
I think some people were surprised like how he was advancing the slides during the presentation. And later they came up to me. I did tell some people, can you see the magic trick that I'm doing on stage? And some people could figure it out. Some people couldn't. But for me, it was like the second demo of the application that I had done, but this was to like a crowd of 300 people. So I was very happy that it worked out quite well. And you can watch the video up on YouTube.
So take us inside the software and tell us about some of the specific features that you've programmed into this, rooms and things like that allow you to do kind of more complex things than just advance.
Sure. Let's go to the iPhone and we'll take a look at the Rooms feature. So there's three main features of the app. Phrases, which I showed you before, how you can like change the cameras and whatnot. The scripts, which take a structured presentation and you can run commands based on what you say during the script. Then there's the rooms feature. So pretend you have a single audio source. You have 4 guests, like a podcast, and you want to basically run actions depending on who is speaking. So the rooms feature does exactly that. You can define speakers. So I have 4 speakers. We got Kara, Mike, Peter, and Cheryl. And I've kind of inserted an audio sample for that person. So then when I go into the room, I just click this, I can basically say when so-and-so is talking, switch to that camera. When this person's talking, switch to that camera. When multiple people are talking, maybe switch to the wide camera. So if people are familiar with MixEffect, I have a feature called Video Follows Audio, which uses the audio input levels to change the camera angles and whatnot. So this does it, except it uses a single audio source. So I'll just run this real quick. You won't be able to hear the audio, but you'll be able to see the camera switching happen in real time. So in this case, the speaker number 1 is talking, and she's going to switch, and then now speaker 2 and speaker 3 or speaker 4. And so when they talk, it just switches automatically to that person. So if they're having a long conversation, you'll see these things happening in real time. So it's a great way if you don't want to do technical directing, you just have the software do it for you. I'll stop right there.
You noted a demo that you did at NAB, and there's some questions that came up at the end. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So at NAB, I obviously didn't bring an ATEM switcher in my backpack, right? So
no,
I had to demo I had to demo action phrase to people. So I was using actually my iPhone that you see right here, and what I was able to do was I had my ATEM running on my Mac, and then I was able to VPN into my house, and then action phrase would be communicating directly with my ATEM and MixEffect that was running in my house. And because I had MixEffect, you can see like the multi-view. I could just speak, and people would see the cuts happening in real time. So when I was saying the things like, let me turn it off right now, focus on Jennifer, focus on Michael, and all those things, people would see on the iPhone all the camera switches that were happening in real time. So it was a really great way to be able to demo the app in front of people without having all this gear with me.
You know, I've had to do demos in front of the crowd, and I have to ask about this. How does it handle voice ID? I'm assuming that if some half-drunk, bored, and obnoxious audience member shouts out, "Next slide," action phrase is not going to activate based on some idiot like that trying to control the presentation. How does it figure out who's talking?
It actually could. So you do have to be a little careful, and you can turn on, there's 2 different speech engines that action phrase supports. One of them that you see on the screen is the Apple speech, and that does a very good job of recognizing any speech that's said anywhere. So if someone were to say quietly or loudly, that might pick up that voice. Right now, action phrase isn't hearing you, it's actually just hearing me right now, so you're not seeing your voice shown on the little preview over on the right. There's another mode or another speech engine that you can use where you can actually provide like a voice print of yourself, and that does a better job of isolating yourself. But there's some tweaks that you need to do to make sure it's consistent and that it's always recognizing your voice. So making improvements there, but there are ways to kind of isolate your voice. I've also been looking at like, can you have like a microphone that you have like very close to your mouth or something like that, or like a bone conducting mic that your iPhone is attached to so that it only hears you and not like all the background noise. But I haven't found a good solution yet for that.
Well, we have a lot of people watching the show. Some of them are highly skilled in audio, so maybe you'll get some suggestions about how to go down that path. You're very specific in the app name. You say for production. This obviously was your first point of emphasis here. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the kinds of things you expected people to be doing with this and why you put that on the name specifically?
Sure. So we go take a look at the Actions tab over here. We can take a look at some of the predefined things that I've configured. But if you click on the plus, you'll see all the different, again, live production, hardware, software, and services that I support. So a couple of audio interfaces, BidFocus Companion, very popular, H2R graphics, you can control HomeKit accessories, HyperDex, my app Look Straight that does kind of face tracking and automation, MIDI, The next version of Action Phrase will support Mimo Live, so it's not in the current shipping version. MIDI, MixEffect, Softron's movie recorder and on-layer video is also coming in the next version. OBS, you can send OSC commands, Pro Presenter, QLab, RouteEffect, Rundown Studio. SlideBridge is an app that I'm working on that controls like Keynote, PowerPoint, and Google Slides. Ultimat, Videohub's vMix, and Zoom ISO. So it's a very broad range of production tools out there. And if there's an API that exists for something that you use that you don't see on this list, let me know, and I can easily add that.
Whenever I get somebody who's a truly skilled developer on the show, and you are certainly in that category, I'm interested in the tools that they are most excited about and what you're using today to do things like that. Do you want to talk through any of your toolkit for how you develop apps that are this cool?
So, like I said before, I had the idea for Action Phrase 2 years ago, but my skills and the technology didn't quite exist back then. But a couple things happened. So last year, Apple introduced again the speech, the improved speech framework that did a great job of transcription. And then, maybe you've heard of this thing called AI, but agentic coding is all the rage now, and it's actually helped me write the app very quickly. I had a very concrete idea of what the app should be, and these LLMs, I use OpenAI's Codex, just help me execute on that vision very quickly and efficiently.
So do you think that's really, it's understanding the capabilities of the various large language models? Because obviously there's a ton of them out there. They seem to be coming and going reasonably quickly now, and there's this big trend into agentic AI. How do you keep up with what the right tool is to use to get your thoughts into code?
Yeah, I've kind of settled on OpenAI's Codex. I know there's, the Claude Code and there's other Cursor and stuff. If you want to go hopping between LLMs, you can certainly do that. I just kind of said, okay, this one's good enough for me. And it's doing a fantastic job. So I gladly pay the money every month to OpenAI. It's a lot of money, but it's worth it. I think, we can talk about the pricing models for agentic coding, but it's worth it for me.
Speaking of pricing, is there anything, how do people get a hold of this, and what's the model that you're looking at for letting people get into the game?
Yeah, so if we take a look at the app again, the app is free to download, and it gives you access to like 5 phrases that you can control and use. And so you can basically create actions based on the phrase and see what happens. A lot of the advanced actions, the one that controls live production hardware and software, you do need to purchase a single in-app purchase, which I'm calling Core. It costs I think it's $25 right now. But it gives you access to unlimited phrases and all these advanced actions like, MIDI, Rundown Studio, MixEffect, and whatnot. And then if you want to have access to like scripts and rooms, those are available through a subscription. And so I think for people who are doing like professional podcasts, this is something that it's a very powerful tool. And so that's kind of gated behind a subscription. You can actually use it and configure everything in Action Phrase under the free tier for scripts and rooms. It just won't trigger the action. So you can see it happening. You can manually run it, but it won't automatically run it. So you can run through a sample script and just see how it works. But then when you're ready to use it in a real life situation, that's when you have to pay.
I think you mentioned there's some hardware that it naturally talks to, essentially, for all lack of a better term, out of the box. And what about people who have switches or who have boards or something else where they'd like to get some sort of access into that? How difficult or easy is it to connect it to different kinds of hardware?
So if there's an API, like a REST API, an OSC API, drop me a note if you don't see it on the list of devices supported, and I can easily add it. But what I think most people are going to be doing is like Companion is like the de facto tool that people use to control all these things. And Companion supports like 600, 900 different devices. So you can actually have Action Phrase push a Companion button. So if you have everything in your Stream Deck, set up and running through Companion, you can just say, push this button on Companion, and then the phrase would be, turn this on, turn this off, or whatever, and it would just push your existing button. if you want to control it directly through the hardware using like the API, then it needs to be added to the app.
Is there anything we haven't taken a look at inside the product that you think, oh gosh, I really have to show them this? It seems like this has a lot of depth to it.
It does, and I think it's more encouraging people to download and try it. So there's a lot of tools that you can use, give it a shot, integrate it with your existing vMix, OBS, Zoom ISO, ATEM workflow, and see how you can use your voice to control things. Like you may not always be next to your Stream Deck ready to push the button or next to your mouse and keyboard and stuff. But if you define a couple commands that you want to use to control something, give it a shot. Or even if you're doing like a live stream, think about how you are presenting, and if there's a way to naturally say things like, go to this device or go to that device. And then as you're talking, you don't have to like have that mental load of like, what button do I need to press? Oh, I need to go to this Stream Deck page and then push this button. Just use your voice.
I'm constantly amazed at how people like you come up with what's the next thing that you're interested in that captures your attention, because there's so many possibilities for using the tool set that you already possess to do that. Do I dare ask you if you're thinking about other types of things at this moment, or am I getting too far ahead since you've really just launched Action Phrase?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the agentic coding has really helped me kind of ideate and iterate over different app ideas. So for instance, actually the videos that you saw when I was like focusing on particular people, I'll turn off the Action Phrase right now so it doesn't switch to Jennifer, Michael, Sanjay, and Tasha. But that's actually controlling a deck link. So, Blackmagic has their little like their sample apps, or their that app that does like a media player express or something like that. But it only supports like one deck link output. So in the past, I had to have like 4 instances of the app open, and then like I have like it would take me like 5 minutes to just configure everybody to show up. But now, I'll turn back on Action Phrase and go to the 4-up layout. And so now all of these guys are running through a single app that I wrote, again, using an LLM that controls the deck link. I just give it the files and it's just playing it back on a loop. And if I can automate it now, and it's really fantastic what these coding tools have allowed me to do. Because it's like I wouldn't have spent a few days working on this. I would have just said, it's too much work. I'm not going to deal with it. I'll just, suffer and do the old-fashioned way, which will take me like 5-10 minutes to set up. But now I had the AI to write it for me, and there you go. And whether this will become a product, I don't know. But it certainly solved a need for me right now.
Absolutely. As I'm not at all surprised, questions are flooding in from our audience. And so in just a couple of minutes, we want to get to the audience questions in this. Is there anything you haven't covered in the software so far that you go, that's a really cool feature and people will really like that, and I haven't covered it yet? Anything that comes off the top of your head?
I say let's jump into the questions. You
ready to jump into Q&A? All right. Cindy Drozda is the question manager for today. Cindy, what's our first question from the audience?
Okay, here's a question for you, Adam, from Andre Delay in Berlin. What was the most unexpected or exciting discovery you had developing this tool?
Oh, good question, Andre.
So this was the first app that I used agentic coding from the get-go, where I didn't write a single piece of code for a long time. So the ability for it to say, here's the API for, like HDR graphics. Just point it at something and go make it. And I had already created my action kind of template and definition files. So it just went to the API, consumed it, and said, I'm done. Here it is. And then I was like testing it. I said, oh, wow, it does like pretty much everything. And so I was like, wow, you can really, to integrate kind of like HDR graphics and Memo Live and ATEM would take like a week for each feature. And then now it takes like seconds. Minutes using codecs. And so that was really like surprising. It's like, this is just me doing it, but then there's like thousands of other people, millions of other people taking advantage of these coding tools right now.
Well, you're also doing that from the point of view of somebody who understands code very deeply and can look in and debug something. How clean was what those services put out? Did you have to tweak? And if so, what skills did you need to be able to identify the things that were going wrong and make them right?
Yeah, so it doesn't do a perfect job. You do definitely need to kind of guide the LLM model. So a lot of it is just looking at what it produces and then testing it and saying, oh, no, I don't think this is the right way to do it. Let's try it this way. So you do have a clear sense of kind of like what you want to produce. But if you do have that kind of like product manager mindset, I find these tools to be really, really fantastic.
So I guess I'm hearing you saying before you start to try to code something, at least sit down and have a solid outline of exactly the steps you want this code, this device, this process to yield, and don't just dive in and try to start making things and fixing them on the fly. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
To a certain extent. So I'll give you a more concrete example. So the first version of Action Phrase, like version 1.0, had the scripts feature. And what that was doing is actually, I got a little too fancy in the initial implementation. So I had the sections. You saw that before. Now actually, I'll bring that back up. And so the sections still existed. So it's like you have the text and then you have the action. But how it actually detected what section you were in, I was trying to be too fancy before. So I was doing what's called lexical adherence, basically analyzing what you were saying and thinking and comparing it with the section. It says, am I in this section? What's my confidence level? And then if it reached a certain confidence, it would say, oh, you're in the Apple legacy. So I will run the actions associated with that. And in my demos, it was working really well. And the reason why it was working well is because I was using pre-recorded audio. I had recorded myself saying the script and I was just feeding the system the thing. And it was just happening in real time, very, very fast, very accurate. But then the instant I stopped using the pre-recorded audio because I needed to save my voice, and I actually started testing the script with my real voice, and it's like, oh, wow, it's not that fast. It's actually kind of falling behind on the recognition. And so that's not good, especially since I had this show, this presentation I was going to give in like a few days. So I didn't have time to fix the scripts, but what I did was I basically used the phrases feature I just would define a phrase in the phrases section that you saw here. And if we can take a look at, if we go to my little deep dish Swift section, you can see all the phrases that were outlined in pink in my little cheat sheet right here. Are right here in this view right here. So when I would say the phrase, it would then run the same action that I had in the script section. So when I came back from the conference, I'm like, oh, I got to refactor the scripts to not use this kind of fancy lexical analysis of what I'm saying and just use a magic phrase. So you define the section and you say, this is the phrase I'm going to say. Do the action whenever I say this phrase. And then I kind of enhance it by saying, okay, if you don't recognize that phrase, maybe I can add an alternate phrase. So within a section, you can have multiple phrases, and then it will just run that action if it missed one of the things you said, but it'll catch the next thing that you say. So once I did that, the features actually worked extremely well.
What I'm hearing is that you're training the model, but you're also training yourself how to interact with it, which makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Next question.
This one comes to us from Brian Jones in Michigan. On average, what's the latency between the spoken phrase and the execution of the command? Also, have you noticed a difference in performance with a wired Ethernet connection versus Wi-Fi?
So the device that you use kind of is very important. I've noticed that on the Mac, the latency is much smaller than on this iPhone 15 Pro Max that I have right here, which is like the kind of like it supports Apple Intelligence and all this stuff, but it's already 3 years old. But you see in the show, I was running it off of the iPhone, and I would say it's maybe like, I don't know, 500 milliseconds a second. I think it's pretty fast. You can control how action phrase detects your voice, so you could use something like what's called like a starting phrase or an ending phrase. So you could be like continuously saying something, and if you say the magic phrase at the end,
like a trigger phrase,
it will run. Yeah. So I'll just give a very quick, brief example. So I'm going to turn on the end phrase here, and we'll just start it up. So if everyone's a fan of Star Trek, you'll recognize this ending phrase. Focus on Jennifer. Engage. back to me. Engage. So, I don't know, maybe like a second.
Took me right to the
Mac,
bridge of a starship.
Pretty fast. Right.
Nice. All right. So there are ways you can work around getting better performance. Does it have to do with the complexity? Because it seems to me from your early description of this that I can have action phrase trigger a sequence of things rather than just one action. So obviously there's going to be a little more latency if you're applying the action phrase to a number of things rather than just one action.
Right. So I'll just take a quick look at one of the phrases that I use. So let's take a look at let's go back to phrases and let's look at that focus. So this particular one does like a bunch of things. You can see like HDR graphics, it clears the graphics, and then it does a source mapping. So this particular phrase takes that word that you say after the focus on, and then it maps it to like a particular thing. So you saw me saying things like Tasha, Sanjay, Michael, and Jennifer, and that maps to an input on my ATEM, as well as a code in HDR graphics to bring up a lower third. So it basically switches to that camera input and then tells HDR graphics to display a lower third, and then does something else with MixEffect. It turns my upstream keyer on air. So it just runs through those actions sequentially, and you can add little delays to if you need to get the timing just right.
Next question.
This one's from me, Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Using action phrase, can I control vMix with spoken phrases as if I were pressing Stream Deck buttons?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So we take a look at the vMix action. You can see you basically specify your host, the IP address of your vMix thing, the port, which is all pretty much standard. If you're using HTTPS, and you can do authentication. And then once you have it connected, you can choose your functions. So these are all the functions that are supported within the vMix API. And you can see there's a lot. So basically come up with think about the vMix controls that you want to control, and then see if it's supported in action phrase, which they probably will, and then just go wild. But again, if you wanted to configure them here, you can. But if you want to if you already use like Companion and Stream Deck, and you've already created all those buttons, it's probably better just to say push button 2, row 2, column 3 on page 15.
Okay, that makes good sense. Little bit of a break here for just a half second while I remind everybody that if you're not here normally, this is officehours.global. If you want to sign up to receive info on coming guests and shows and things like that, get more fabulous content like we're receiving from Adam tonight, just go to that place, www.officehours.global. All right, let's get to our next question.
Here we have one from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. How do you avoid the reactive lag, switching to someone only after they've started talking? Can you say, ready for camera 2 and go?
Can you make this a real TD?
That's a good feature request. Right now, it's using the end phrase. So I think there's like a delay. I don't know if it's configurable, but you would say, your phrase, and then you see that bar that was going across when I was doing the end phrase. I'll turn it back on, and you can see how long it takes to go away. Back to me. So you see that thing. So if I were to say engage, it would run that thing within that time frame. And I'm not sure if that's configurable, but that might be a good thing to add. It doesn't do the arming, which I think you might want to do, you can do an indeterminate amount of time until you say that thing. But with the end phrase, you can certainly pause for a little bit before you say the thing that you want to go.
There's no way to cache a series of actions so that they can execute faster. That doesn't seem to me it makes any sense in terms of this.
There's no batch queuing of commands, so you can't.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there is. You could actually say multiple phrases at once, and then it would just run all of them. There's an option to say, if you look in settings, I think recognition, let's see. There is a way to say like run multiple commands, or just run like a single command, or show me like a list of options if you say multiple commands at the same time. Yeah.
The way directors would essentially say, let's set up the Chiron on 7 and then cut to 7. pre-build a set of things. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off course here. Let's get to our next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington asks, so anything in Companion can be voice controlled?
Guy sounds a little intrigued.
Yeah. So again, take a look at the Companion control. There's Companion's API. Actually, there's 3 different APIs. There's a TCP, a HTTP, and OSC. And if you look at them, they actually have different commands that are supported on each of the different methods. So the TCP IP one can do the changing of the page, but the HTTP and OSC can't. So anything that's in the API is supported by action phrase. So this is the HTTP one. You can see all the different things that it's supported. If we switch it to the HTTP, we can take a look at these commands. Very similar, not the same. And then OSC, again, very similar to HTTP.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Next up is Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How do you choose practical action phrases that feel natural to say but are distinct enough to avoid false triggers? And can changing modes help reduce accidental actions?
So for this particular show, I've created a bunch of phrases that I've been saying, and I actually have a little cheat sheet in front of me that I will say. Action phrase is not running right now, so I can say all these things without fear of them.
Very
changing.
dependably
So
analog, Adam.
Yeah. Back to me. All right now. Okie dokie. And then the focus on iPhone be gone. Let's get rid of the iPhone. Let's hide the iPhone. Take a look at Keynote. So basically, if you're doing like live streams and stuff, you know what you're going to say. You might even have a script. So think about like if you wanted to use action phrase to like switch to different cameras, you might say something like, okay, let's go to the iPad, or let's look at the presentation. And then maybe another time you might say back to the presentation or something else. So I would definitely come up with unique phrases to use. Yeah, it's really a trial and error. Practice makes perfect.
Guys, next question delves deep into how much control you can get. So let's go to the next question.
And Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington is back with us. With the Behringer X32, could I say something to turn down fader 2 by 25%?
That's a good question. Let's take a look. So input fader, let's see, level input, and then dB or normalized. It might be possible. I need to check if this one can take like a negative or like a plus value. If you put like a negative or plus sign, and then
Sure.
it will do that. I know there was one that could. I wasn't sure if it's the X32 or the Allen and Heath.
Okay. That's an interesting thing. So you have to be aware of a ton of different kind of hardware configurations and know whether or not the API is robust enough for you to be able to get hooks into it to let this program work with it. Am I reasonably accurate in that description?
Yeah, well, again, I like pointed the API and then it created all the actions. And then I would look at, can it do a particular thing? Like, again, like this 20% thing. And I remember there was one that could do it. I don't remember which one it was.
So theoretically possible, certainly. Maybe there's a little more code that needs to.
If the API supports it, then yes.
Mm-hmm.
But if the API doesn't support it, I'm not doing like creating like this meta action over it where it's like, oh, I see you want to do it by 20%. So I'm just like lower it sequentially. There's actually one important thing is there's no feedback necessarily from the other devices back into action phrase. So it's very much of a fire and forget system.
Mm-hmm.
So Companion's been doing a lot of work on providing feedback with devices. I don't want to make Companion for an action phrase. I think Companion's doing a great job. This is more like I say something, I want it to do something.
Yeah, bidirectional gets pretty complicated, I would imagine. If the response is this, then no, that's going to get way out of control. Next question.
Here's another one from me, Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Where can I find tutorials on how to set up action phrase?
So you can go to my YouTube channel. I think there's a link that someone will put up into the chat. Otherwise, just youtube.com/Adam Tao, and I will be posting more videos on action phrase. Basically, I'm hoping that any video that I do, I'll be using action phrase to kind of control it, so I don't have to like push buttons. For all my previous videos, I created like these dedicated Stream Deck buttons just for that video, and I would like push them in the show, being careful not to show my hands like pushing buttons. I much prefer just like saying it. And so, watch the video, see how I'm doing it, and then watch the actual dedicated action phase videos that I'll be producing. And hopefully one thing I hope that other people, just like with MixEffect, other people will kind of use the app and say, hey, look at this cool app. Look what I can do, and make their own kind of tutorials videos for other people.
I'm noticing from you, and I do the same thing. Are you talking with your hands more now that you don't need them to be hovering over an ATEM?
I want to be able to do that, yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, more expressive, particularly if you're on stage and, physicality is part of a presentation to keep people interesting. That's fascinating. Next question.
Our next one comes in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Will action phrase work on older iPads pre-M1?
Overall question, is there hardware constraints on what can run this appropriately, Adam?
If your device supports iOS 26 or iPadOS 26, action phrase will work on it. So I have it running on iPad minis, which aren't using the M processor series, and it works just fine. So
great. So there's a large range of hardware that this can function with. That'll be very good to know for a lot of people. Next question.
Brian Jones in Michigan is asking, have you tested action phrase in a noisy environment with background audio, like a concert or church service?
There's a practical question. What's the signal-to-noise ratio requirement, maybe?
Yeah, so this is where you want to experiment with a really good mic that's like I actually find the wired Apple mic headset to be actually pretty good. If you just kind of like hold it to your mouth and cover it, it actually does a pretty good job of recognizing your voice. Or using the other speech engines. So if we take a look at the action phrases speech setting, there's the fluid audio speech engine, and in here you can actually map it to your voice. We take a look at where is it? Speaker manager, voice enrollment. So I can enroll my voice, and in this environment, I would enroll my voice in here. But if I was like at a concert or something like that, I would probably enroll the voice in that environment itself and see how it works. But again, yeah, that's gonna be difficult. I think I'm trying to find the solution to that myself by having like a mic that's like very sensitive just to my voice when I'm talking into it.
We brought that up actually earlier, and I noticed that Mickey has a note in the panel chat. No, not in the panel chat, in the YouTube chat. So, our Mukana chat. So, there's some suggestions as to hardware. Let's go to our next question.
Next up is a question from John Wallace in Pontiac, Michigan. Can the app respond to triggers from Companion for faster response where a talking head is moving faster than what can be switched by a voice?
Can you repeat that question? I need to think about that.
It seems like he's looking...
rephrase it.
Yeah, he wants super responsiveness. And so once something is under the control of action phrase, is there a way to connect a hardware something or other so that if you desperately need to get things faster, or is this always going to be limited by how quickly your computer and your system reacts and processes voice commands? Yeah,
it'll be limited to the hardware device that's running action phrase. So like I said, like if you run it on the Mac, I find its transcription to be faster. I'm on an M2 Max MacBook Pro, so I would assume naturally like an M4, M5 will be even faster.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you excited to get a hold of one of the new M5s coming out and seeing how much extra performance you get out of it?
Maybe wait for the M6.
There's always another machine.
There's always another machine coming.
The hardware conundrum. Do I buy this now? Oh, God, if I buy it now and 3 months later something at the same price is twice as fast, I'm going to hate myself. Next question.
Here's another one from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Does action phrase distinguish unique voices or speaker identities? And if so, what features or operations does that enable inside the app?
You touched a little.
Yeah, so that works in the Rooms feature. So we take a look at the triggers over here. We can see, let's look at this Kara talking one. So the conditions are when a certain speaker is talking, when a speaker is not talking, selected speakers are talking, multiple speakers are talking, no one is talking, unknown speakers talking, a timer interval, like you want something to happen every 60 seconds, or a speaker level, like I think that's how much they're speaking or maybe how loud. And then you can specify like how long they're talking for. there's a minimum threshold of talking. That's 0.02 seconds, and then you can add onto it. So if I say 1 second, they need to be talking for 1.2 seconds for the trigger to work. And then you can also set like a priority. If there's multiple triggers of the same priority, the high ones will take precedence. So there are ways you can configure kind of the conditions and thresholds. So it's a lot more sophisticated than MixEffect's video follows audio feature at the moment, if you're familiar with that.
I want to take a little break for just a second because I've been so incredibly excited about your MixEffect software for a long time. And I know it's been out there for a while. A lot of people are using it, I think, to a very, very powerful effect. We hear about it here at Office Hours, people using it all over the place. What's the current state? What's happening with MixEffect Pro?
Yeah, so I've been busy writing a lot of different apps, and so I haven't been giving as much attention to MixEffect as I would like to. Blackmagic, at NAB, they announced a bunch of new ATEMs, more at the very high end of the ATEM lineup. And they also introduced things like Fairlight Live, and there's things you can configure on the ATEM to just route the audio to it. So one of the more immediate things is kind of just bringing support for those little checkboxes and stuff. I don't personally have a home network ready for SMPTE 2110 or 100G networks. That would be lovely to have, but full support for that might have to wait. What I really want to do though is actually rewrite MixEffect and bring it up to the modern coding standards. So MixEffect was written back in the iPadOS iOS 14 days, and since then there's iOS 15, 16, 17, 18, and now there's 26. So there's been a lot of under the hood improvements with Apple's kind of coding frameworks that I want to support. And so I need to refactor large parts of MixEffect to support that. So I can take advantage of the new things that are out there. So it's going to take some time, but I think it'll be worth the wait.
Lest anybody think there was a big gap between those, that Apple, I think, wisely decided to start naming things in terms of the date that it was, the year. So 17 to 26 was not skipping over a lot. It was just new nomenclature on the Apple side. All right, let's get back into our regular Q&A. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington asks, what could one say if they wanted to use the RouteEffect app to patch a Videohub Source 4 to Destination 5?
Pretty specific.
Well, I mean, I do support RouteEffect. It does use, I believe, the zero-based index. So if source 4 might be really source 3. But the phrase itself can be whatever you want. So if you use the mapping feature, you could actually use natural English sounding terms. Like you could say patch video source, Canon camera to the aux output, right? You could whatever you want, and then you use the mapping to actually map that to the right number.
Next question. Paul's looking for, this is pretty new, but is anybody out there field testing it essentially?
Yeah, so I released it in April, and I've done a couple of videos, and I'm looking at the downloads. They haven't been that extensive. So I don't know how many people are using it beyond myself. I don't, I'm very privacy minded. I don't track user installs or see what people are doing. I rely on the community to make videos or just talk about it naturally, on forums. So please start using it. Start telling other people about it. I really think it's a powerful app that could really boost your live production workflow.
Well, it sounds like you have direct experience. You've been taking it out on the road. You've done in front of big audiences, and you've had significant success with allowing it to take some of the load off, the cognitive load at least. I mean, sure, you have to learn the new phrases, but not having to go back to the central computer and hit buttons over and over again must have been kind of a nice freeing tactic.
Yeah, it's certainly great for me, and I just want other people to take advantage of it. And, it's, although, I do say, for live production, things like the scripts feature is very geared towards people who do just regular presentations. So if they're using Keynote, PowerPoint, or Google Slides, I have this app that's coming out that will basically Action Phrase can interface with it more easily. So you can say you can go to a particular slide, you can start the slides, restart the slides, stop the slides. So I really think like teachers and presenters are going to benefit from Action Phrase. It's just a matter of how do I market to those people, and that's I guess the problem that any indie app faces with limited marketing budget. How do you reach the people? And I've been fortunate with MixEffect that the community has basically marketed the app for me, so I haven't had to do much, and I'm trying to kind of get the ball rolling on Action Phrase in the same manner.
Let's go to our next question.
This one's from Florence Donald in Silver Spring, Maryland. Other than Companion and Keynote, what other apps can be controlled with Action Phrase versus hardware?
What are the apps? So we bring up the action section and pull up this. We've talked about Companion, H2R graphics, let's see, Memo Live, MIDI, Movie Recorder, OBS, on-the-air video, Pro Presenter, which is used a lot in Houses of Worship, QLab, Rundown Studio, Hardware Ultimate, vMix, and Zoom ISO.
There you go. That's the existing extent, but I'm sure as people need more, you can always ping Adam and see if there's a connection possible. Let's go to our next question.
And here's another one from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Adam, is Action Phrase designed now or in the future to manage multiple voice inputs with different output actions? And when would you use one shared instance versus multiple instances?
It's the state of multitasking, I guess.
Yeah, this is a good architectural question. It'd be great if you could feed in multiple audio sources and then route them to different groups. So let's say you had a group that's, Kara's actions, and then you have an audio source coming into probably your Mac, not an iPhone or iPad, that says when audio is coming from this source, like a Dante source or some other network source, map them all to Kara's actions or map them to Cheryl's actions. That would be fantastic to have. There is API support within Action Phrase, so you could send it like OSD commands to evaluate phrases, but you'd have to do the mapping stuff yourself at the moment. But that's certainly something I've been thinking about, but it's a big architectural change to the app that I'm not quite prepared to start working on.
That's got to be difficult. I mean, there's so much progress in so many areas, particularly now that AI is helping and the rest of that. There seems to be a lot of this is the latest and greatest, but I've got tons of things that were done before the latest and greatest exists. How do you as a developer make that call as to when it's important to go back and revise code that you've been relying on and when it's better to just start over and go new? Any thoughts on that as a developer?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at MixEffect. This is probably the best example. The code was almost entirely written by me, by hand. But if I were to completely refactor it, would I give the LLM access and say, just rewrite it, right? But you can't release a product like that without extensive testing, since there's a lot of people who are using the app right now and are familiar with it. So for that particular app, when I get around to it, it's more like, let's refactor a small portion of it first and see how that works and extensively test it. With Action Phrase, you saw earlier, I explained how the scripts feature was kind of suboptimal. And then the tester was myself. And then I would say, I know exactly what I want. So I say, stick the LLM on it, and it rewrote it to exactly how I wanted it to work.
I don't know why, but I've been thinking a lot about LLMs and all this ability of generative AI to really change so many of the landscapes you work inside of now. And for some reason, I've been off on a tangent where I was thinking of bell curves becoming more like mesas, flattening the top because so many people have access to the same thing. As a developer, you've put a lot of time and effort across your entire career into learning command of these old things that are now getting essentially kind of automated. Any thoughts on how you see your path going forward? I know you're incorporating a lot, you're right on the cutting edge, and you're making use of these, but anything you see downrange that are either difficulties or big possible advantages to this kind of sweeping change going across the industry?
Yeah, I think the future of like the indie developer is definitely in question. Certainly people can vibe code an app that kind of does what maybe 60% of the people want to do, but to get something that's like finely crafted, that works, that's consistent, that is not doing funny stuff behind the scenes, still takes some degree of kind of skill and expertise to kind of guide, the LLM to do. So I think there's still going to be a space for indie developers with like really finely crafted applications, whether they're written by hand or generated by an LLM. But are they going to get drowned out by what they call the AI slop that's around them? Like, why would I buy this app when there's this app or this app? I don't know. I think marketing has something to do with it, and kind of associating quality with a particular developer could be another kind of way to kind of separate yourself from the crowd. I'm hoping that my apps, yes, I use AI, but at the same time, I know what I'm doing, and I hope that the app services your needs.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot recently because there's a lot of discussion of this in the areas that I work in the voiceover community, because there's so much of AI that's encroaching on that. And I remember writing the phrase, mid is death now. To have just average skills in any endeavor is going to get harder and harder. But the people who really have exceptional skills, there will almost always, I hope, be a place for those people, even if it's sad for me that I'm not in some of those categories. But I'm certainly learning to work around that and watching out for that, because it's going to get tough out there and for a lot of people, for a lot of things. Anyway, that's soapboxing, and I'm going to try to get back into the next question because we've got a few more to get to before we finish it up. Next question.
Here's one from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What shows and podcasts, etc., are using action phrase, and what have the results been?
Well, I think Adam just noted that it's so new and he hasn't really got a lot of it out there. So any feedback from anybody at this point, or are we still early in the process?
I'm talking to people who might want to incorporate it into their shows, but nothing to report right now. And if you know of anyone using it, let me know. It's the same thing with MixEffect. I think, okay, here's a funny story. So I was at NAB, and it was like Sunday. I had just arrived from Arizona, where I was at the Grand Canyon, and I'm like walking along the West Hall, and I stopped by the Amazon booth, and I'm like, they had this whole podcast setup on one side, and they had their little control center like right behind the wall. And I was like, I did a double take because they had an iPad that was running MixEffect, and I was like, what? And they were using MixEffect's Video Falls audio feature to do this camera switching of their podcast that they were running periodically throughout the conference show. And I talked to the booth people and said, hey, I'm the developer of this app. And they're like, oh, wow. We have some questions because we were trying to use OBS to do this Video Falls audio thing, and it wasn't working. So I found your app, but I'm running into some problems. So I'm like, I troubleshooted some things with them and got it working. And throughout the whole conference, it worked very well. And people were asking like, how are you doing this? And they were explaining, oh, it's this app and stuff. So sometimes I don't know who's using my app. And it takes me like walking by a booth to see it happening. It would be great if people were to tell me, but that's not always the case.
Well, if nothing else, let's get out. I've got two more questions, but I'm going to take a tiny micro break here. If people want to connect with you, how's the best way for them to reach you, Adam?
I'm kind of like everywhere, whether it's on Reddit, the Discords, the Office Hours Discord, the Here to Record Discord, my YouTube channel. There's feedback links in the emails, or feedback links in the apps to reach me. So it's not that hard to find me.
Okay, so if you're using any of Adam's, any of the apps that Adam's has touched, you can probably find a connection to him, or ping us here at Office Hours and ask in the morning. And, we've known Adam forever, and he's one of our favorite people around here, so we'll get you connected. Let's go to our last couple of questions. Next question.
This is another one from me. I think I saw that action phrase doesn't work on macOS yet. When will that happen?
Is this just an iOS app at this point, Adam?
Oh, no. It actually works on macOS. What was happening was when you submit an app to Apple, they go through two different submissions processes and two different review processes. So the iOS and iPadOS app were approved fairly quickly, but the macOS app just took a lot longer. It took like over a week longer. And eventually it was approved and I released it.
I wonder if that has to do with the size of the App Store. No, it can't because they're both gargantuan. Next question.
This one's from Paul Ball, who's in Austin, Texas. What is your experience with the whisprflow.ai app, and how does it compare to your app?
Do you know that one?
I have not used that app yet. So I know about Whisper, but I don't know if whisprflow AI is something different.
To be continued. Well, that's going to bring us essentially to the end of all of this. Any last words, Adam? Anything you want to say to people that we haven't already covered through the course of today's show?
Well, it's just thank you for all the years of kind of supporting me with the MixEffect app. I mean, it's been, I think, 5 years. In May when I released the app, and the response has been tremendous. I've met so many people that I didn't know before, and it was great. And now, I love to build tools for people, and so action phrases is like the next tool, voice control for your live production. So give it a shot and let me know how it works for you.
Absolutely excellent. Hey, joining us next week is show friend and panelist Leo Mindell, who's dropping by from London to tour us through the popular content distribution platform StreamYard. So if you build content for multiple targets, StreamYard is one popular solution. And Leo, along with Craig McFarland and a few others, are going to be doing a deep dive into it and addressing your questions. That's next week on the Tuesday Focus here. And I just get to say at the end of this always, this show does not happen in a isolated vacuum. There are a tremendous number of people on the back end of this, all working hard to make this happen for you. Our major constituencies, those of you who watch the show, those of you who had questions to the show, and our incredible tech crew in the back. So as the credit rolls, pay some attention to names. A lot of very talented people doing really exceptional work. If you had gone around to get these questions answered to everybody who participated in the Q&A today, you would have traveled the Tlaloc Traversal for this episode 2247. 31,000 miles. That's 50,000 kilometers. 244 million bananas for scale. Thank you, everybody. We will be back next week with that next show. We appreciate your watching. And Adam, thank you so much for stopping by. Great to see you. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye. Great job.
Oh, excellent, Joe. That was really well done. And Adam and Bill both, well done on the questions. We really